Hi, I'm TD Walker. I blog over at Freethought Blogs at Freethinking Ahead, and this video on creativity without the woo is part of Freethought Blogs Winterfest. To find out more about Winterfest, go to freethoughtblogs.com. Later on, I will be joined by my fellow Freethought Blogs bloggers, William Brinkman of the Bowling Book Babbler and Megan Rahm of From the Ashes of Faith. Enjoy. Hi, I'm TD Walker, and this is The Creative Skeptic, or How to Live the Magic, Embrace the Mystery, and Invoke the Muses when you don't believe in supernatural forces. Hello, creative people, and hello, people who are just curious about creativity. You might be thinking right now, I'm interested in the topic, but I'm not creative. I'll argue that even if you don't think you actively create anything, you still make dozens of creative choices each day. Do you read books? Do you watch TV or movies? Do you play games? Do you listen to music? Do you wear clothes? Then yes, you are creative. So this talk is for you too. Now that we've established our audience, let's step back a little, way back. We'll start by looking at Homer's Odyssey, which is something most of us are familiar with, the ancient Greek tale of Odysseus' journey after the Trojan War, in which he tries to go home to his faithful wife Penelope and their son. So, does the epic begin with Odysseus' longing for home, or with Penelope wondering where her husband is? No, it begins with an entreaty to the Muse. In this case, tell me, O Muse, of that ingenious hero who traveled far and wide after he had sacked the famous town of Troy. In the West, tradition tells us that it's not the author making up the story, but instead a supernatural force, in this case in the form of a muse, an inspirational goddess who fosters creativity in the person who appeals to her. Fine, so ancient artists appealed to supernatural figures for help in creating their work. But what about the present day? It's an idea that still resonates today, even if we don't literally believe in muses. If I, as a writer, call someone my muse for a poem, I'm pretty sure you'll understand that that person was central to my process of writing that poem, even if there's nothing supernatural going on. That's not to say that we've moved past the idea of the need for supernatural help when we're creating art, dance, theater, poems, and so on. Let's take a look at a couple recent examples. First off, Julia Cameron's The Artist Way, which was first published in 1992. This book is hugely influential to a lot of creative people, myself included. While there are a lot of useful tools in this book, and the two that follow it up, so much of what Julia Cameron communicates is couched in supernatural terms. The saving grace here, I think, is that she hedges on the supernatural bit, saying that you can think of God as an acronym for good orderly direction. Next, we'll come to a more problematic example. In this case, Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear. And you might know Elizabeth Gilbert from her book, Eat, Pray, Love. This book was reviewed in the New York Times in 2015 by Willa Paskin, and Paskin notes that there's a parallel in this book to The Secret, in which good attitudes and right beliefs are rewarded, and not hard work. And she goes into the idea that Gilbert talks about ideas as having will of their own, which puts this in the league of books like The Secret, where if you just believe hard enough, you'll get the outcome that you want, which we know is not the case. And I'll put a link to this review in the comments as well below this video. So there are books out there with advice driven by spiritual beliefs. Lots of people find that inspiring or comforting. So what? Well, here's what. Inspiring, comforting advice doesn't always tell us what's going on and what will actually help us succeed. So our questions for today are these. Why is so much advice on creativity couched in spiritual terms? And how can thinking about creativity in spiritual terms hinder our own creativity? So first, let's talk about dispensing with the supernatural terms. One of the difficulties of writing about creativity is that we don't know exactly what's going on in our heads, so we don't have a pat formula for generating creative work that will work for every person every time. There are things that are in general are useful, such as going on walks that writers have embraced as a useful tool for centuries, and you'll find that in a lot of creativity books aimed at writers. That said, if we rely on the supernatural, though, then we don't get to the substance of the issue. That is, we say, oh, it's just the muse or the universe or something like that. And then we miss the chance of figuring out why what works actually works. So if we go for a walk in nature, it's not nature as a force or a being that's inspiring us. There's something about the physical act of walking and the attention that we're paying around us that helps us untangle the problem that we're working on, for example. There's also the issue that using the supernatural replaces what actually works. If we can assign credit for our successes to the universe or to the muses or whatever, then we can also foist our failures off on them too. That's not to say all our failures to create are under our control. I could do a whole other talk about the role privilege plays and who has the time and energy to write here and now, but that's for another time. To come back to my point, if you can push off the blame for your not creating on the unwillingness of the muse to visit you or on the universe feeling that you're just not ready for a project, rather than accepting that you binged watched yet another TV show instead of turning off the television and getting your writing in for the day, then will you commit to sitting in the chair and working? Because sitting in the chair and working is how your work gets done. There are people who find comfort in accountability to others. Here we see images of the muse Polyhymnia on the right carrying some pretty sharp farming tools, and on the left Thor wielding his hammer as he does. If I believed in either one, I'd be pretty regular about sitting down and working, lest I face these particular editors. Gotta say, all the editors I've worked with have been lovely and none have used farming tools on my work, so that's good. Anyway, that's all well and good until maybe you decide that Polyhymnia over there thinks you can take a day off, or several days off, or the universe thinks that you're just not in a good place to pursue your music right now. I think the danger here in relying on accountability you can't see is that you miss the chance to have accountability from people in your community. Real people are more concrete, of course, and thus more of a visible reminder of what you're trying to do. And having that accountability from a writing group, for example, opens so many doors for so many opportunities in both in your field and, just to create community. And really, Thor hasn't held any open mics in, 1,000 years or so? So. So these are the dangers in relying on the supernatural for creativity. But how do we foster our community in the here and now? So let's talk about how to foster your creativity no matter what your belief system happens to be. So we're going to talk about the 3 C's: context, constraints, and community. So first up, we're going to talk about context. The idea here of context is knowing the field you're working in and what ideas have been embraced, discarded, re-examined, and changed, for example. I'm always rather shocked when I encounter poets who want to be read but who don't read any poetry themselves. This is more common than you think, unfortunately. When it happens, I take it as an opportunity to talk about some of my favorite poets, but still I worry that some larger point is missed here. I think we can take a lesson from popular music. One of the best parts of the interviews that I read with popular musicians is that they're always very quick to name musicians whose work that they love, and often they'll list the musicians and the bands that they grew up listening to. So I think that's a lesson we can all learn from. So here's some questions to ask yourself. What is the history of your field? What are others currently doing in your field, and why are they doing that? What are others doing in fields outside of yours, and why? This is another good reason to read widely, which is a piece of advice you'll find, again, in a lot of creativity guides that are aimed at authors. Read in your genre, but read outside your genre. So the last question is, what are the generally accepted principles of your field? And again, ask why. So next up, constraints. What are we talking about when we talk constraints? Well, so many times you'll hear people say, I don't want to be constrained. Oh, but you do. To a point, but constraints give us an interesting set of approaches to a problem. To go back to writing, think of all the poetic forms there are, like the sonnet or the haiku or even the limerick. They're all quite different ways to get to different ends. They just give us a different lens to see the creative puzzle through. So, constraints are ways in which you can make the box more interesting, because we're all working in a box. We just need to make it more interesting for us. And one of the writing guides that I do recommend is Lisa Cron's Story Genius. And she notes that rather than unleashing your creativity in a sort of unconstrained sort of way, you want to harness it to the past from which your story arises. So she, in essence, tells writers to constrain themselves with the box that is the character's past history. And finally, constraints give us a way to think about the task of creating in fresh ways while not hindering us or preventing us from creating altogether. I think we've all looked at the blank page, or I can say the blank page as a writer, but whatever the blank page is for creative people in other fields. And if you're just looking at a blank page and you don't know where to go from there, that's very daunting. But if you have a set of constraints, that makes the blank page far less daunting. And last up, we have community. Why community? Well, get to know others in your field. You can do that through local or online gatherings of creatives. Lots of opportunities to do that online. Making a Literary Life by Carolyn C. is another writing guide that I really highly recommend. She suggests you write charming notes to authors and others whose work you admire, introducing yourself and saying what about their work you particularly enjoy or appreciate or are inspired by. And in that way, you're complimenting them, but you're also making a connection. Others to get to know in your field are supporters of your field, people who might not be working in your field but who might be allied to it. So if you're a writer, get to know the booksellers in your local community or online. How is community important? Well, community helps you build a better sense of the context that you're working in. And it can also give you some more ideas for interesting ways that you can use the constraints. So community ties back into the previous two. And this last point is very important, I think. Once you find your community, do something for your community. As I previously mentioned, supporting others is a way to connect to them. So not only writing the charming notes, as Carolyn C. Suggests, but also writing reviews or telling others via social media or just word of mouth whose work you appreciate. And you can lend your talents to create a movement to foster more understanding about your field or more visibility for your field in the wider community. And now a word on creativity from William Brinkman, one of my fellow Freethought Blogs bloggers. William Brinkman is best known as the creator of the Bolingbroke Babbler, a satirical blog weaving his interests in science, skepticism, humanism, social justice, and Bolingbroke, Illinois. Yes, he did meet one of Bolingbroke's mayors and wasn't arrested. He also contributed short stories to White Wolf's Demon, The Fallen, game line, and was a member of the Camarilla's U.S. Mage storytelling team. He now publishes Bolingbroke Babbler stories on Freethought Blogs and writes occasional nonfiction posts as well. William is currently working on his second novel, The Rift, which is based on his Babbler stories. He lives in Illinois with his wife and partner, along with their 2 cats.
My name is William Brinkman. I'm the writer of the Bolingbroke Babbler, an online satirical work I've published since 1998. I'm a former contributor to White Wolf Publishing and a former member of the Camarilla National Storytelling Team. So, what is creativity? To me, as a skeptic, I'll tell you what it's not. It doesn't come from a divine being or muses or through magic. It doesn't even have to be in relation to artistic fields. It can be applied to any endeavor or any type of problem solving. What it is a process to either create new works or new ways of solving a problem. And and as I said, a process, it means ideas or solutions just don't pop out of your head complete and fully functional. It takes work. And to clarify what I mean by the process, it's first of all, I imagine it's free up your imagination or brainstorming to come up with ideas. And then once you have a set of ideas, refine them and discard the ideas that don't work until you have something like a reasonable outline. And then start doing your work, either your novel or problem solving or poem. And then as you're working on it, you'll probably make revisions as necessary and come up with new ideas and then apply them and repeat this several times. And then once you have a draft ready to go, get some feedback on it. And after you receive the feedback, make revisions and maybe make your own changes. You don't have to take all the suggestions. Once you think you have a complete work, release it and then see what happens. So if you want to be creative in any field, I would say study the field or type of art you want to create. Look at examples. Take classes if you can. I took many classes in college for creative writing, and I had high school instructors and teachers who were willing to help me learn creative writing, and a family that was very supportive. That was my example. And then once you feel you have a good groundwork, take a shot at creating something. And it's okay to use the established conventions of a field. But if you want to try something completely new, you're welcome to, but don't feel like you have to, because not everyone can be a groundbreaking artist or scientist or problem solver. That's fine. And then and then once you've created a work, don't stop creating, because your first effort might not be the best, but your 100th effort might be very good. But you've got to write your first effort before you can reach your 100th effort. And as I mentioned earlier, getting feedback, don't be afraid of receiving reasonable, sincere feedback. Of course, there are trolls out there. Ignore them. They just want to make you feel bad. But, I'll admit, even with sincere, reasonable criticism, it can be hard to take. I've been guilty of not taking it well, and I've offered advice to other people, and some of them haven't taken it well either. But if you can, just try to get from advice or criticism from more than one person, so you can work out a general theme, because you might have some outliers. And once you have like a general theme, make revisions either to your current work or to your next work, and repeat from there. And for an example of what I do for my articles for The Babbler, I'll look for inspiration from news events, blog posts, or whatever's going on in the Bolingbrook Facebook groups. I'll think of some ideas, then do an initial draft, make revisions, see how it goes, and then I'll have my wife or someone else take a look and offer their suggestions and revisions. I'll consider them and maybe make my own changes as well, and then publish them. So pretty much in conclusion, creativity to me isn't something that's granted from like magic or gods. It's a process that comes from within, and it's a process you control. It takes time and effort to be really good at creating things, but results can be worth it, especially if you have a book out or you've crafted something that you can take pride in. And thank you for listening to me. If you want to see another example of my creative efforts, my new novel, The Rift, should be published in 2021. Thank you.
And finally, here's another word on creativity from another fellow Freethought Blogs blogger, Megan Rahm. Megan Rahm is a restless mom from Toledo, Ohio, who has found her voice in art and writing. Her spirited 4-year-old daughter often inspires her work, and she never leaves her house without her Chromebook and Sharpies. She loves Toledo's weather and hates Costco on a Saturday afternoon. Being an atheist plays a significant role in her life. Check out her blog From the Ashes of Faith at freethoughtblogs.com. Her upcoming poetry book, Free to Roam, Poems from a Heathen Mommy, will be released on February 2nd, 2021.
Hi, I'm Megan Rahm. I write for Freethought Blogs. The name of my blog is called From the Ashes of Faith. I also have a poetry book that's going to be released on February 2nd. It's called Free to Roam, Poems from a Heathen Mommy. It's being published by Freethought House. So I wanted to tell you about the creative process that I had in writing this poetry book. So first of all, I don't believe in writer's block or waiting for inspiration. For me, it's just like priming a well. You just have to sit down and get to work and something will come to you. And with writing, I almost feel like that's kind of easy because you can always just start writing like a journal entry or write about a memory. You could write about anything, something that happened to you. You really just have to sit down and start writing and something will come. That's always worked for me. And actually, another big part of my creative process is meditation. I meditate with mala beads every day. I started meditating with mala beads. I was having a difficult time and I used them to cope with anxiety. And I realized that was really helping me focus and it helped me with my work as well. And they're really simple. You know, mala beads are often used for like a spiritual practice, but for me, you just repeat like a phrase or a mantra as you touch each bead. And it's just really simple to do. It's amazing how well it works, really. So that's a part of my creative process. You know, and so many ideas come to me while I meditate that I keep a notebook nearby as well. So almost everything I write is inspired by real life. Being a mom gives me a ton to write about. All the poems in my book are based on my own story. I carry notebooks with me everywhere, just if something comes to mind or if I see something. I'm a big fan of huge purses and huge bags, because I always have notebooks with me. And then when I actually write poems, I start by just jotting down phrases and sometimes just words and phrases. Most of the time, I don't even quite know exactly what I'm going to write about. I just kind of have like an idea. And then the poems kind of take shape from there. Every once in a while, I do have something planned out and I know exactly what I want to say. And sometimes that works out, but most of the time it seems like almost like the poems take a life of their own. I had an instructor who used to tell me to write it out, which meant, when I'm writing a poem, I just keep adding and adding and adding. Even when I think it's done, just, keep going, keep adding as much as you possibly can. And then from there, when you have a lot of material, then you start cutting things. So once I had a lot of poems written, I kind of hit this wall, just kind of what's next? Where do I go from here? And that's when I started doing some major revisions. It just seemed like one day I just sat down and just cut all the poems I just felt very lukewarm about. I just cut a bunch of poems. I even combined a few poems, which was interesting. I'm surprised it worked actually, but it actually worked really well. But those revisions were really a turning point for me. And then finally, when I finished the book up, I hit a point where it was a shit or get off the pot moment when I finally, turned the manuscript into my publisher. I just hit a point where I just had to say, I'm done. I can't add anymore. I can't do anymore. I'm done. So it was kind of hard to do that. So there's one other thing I wanted to bring up about my creative process. And that is, I have schizoaffective disorder, which it's a mental illness with the combined symptoms of schizophrenia and a mood disorder. So I am on a shit ton of psych meds. So it's just, I've done, things with writing. I've done art shows, and people sometimes ask me, well, don't your meds, don't they, stifle or dampen your creativity? And the answer is no, they don't. When I'm symptomatic, when I'm off meds, I can't function. I can't follow through. I can't finish projects. So when I'm on meds, not only am I still creative, but I get stuff done. I actually accomplish things. So another part of my creative process then is just making sure I'm feeling well, really. Mental health is huge. So that's it. So thank you, Tammy, for allowing me to participate in this video. Okay, thank you. Bye.
hope you enjoyed our talks today about creative processes without the woo. If you have any questions about creativity or specifically about creativity without the woo, feel free to send me an email, info@tdwalker.net, or leave a question in the comments and I will get back to you as soon as I can. For more information about Freethought Blogs, visit freethoughtblogs.com. Thank you.